All right, so the week ahead coming up, the EFF says it will not allow President Cyril Ramaphosa to deliver his State of the Nation address on Thursday this week until he comes clean on the Phala saga. Dr. Thapelo Tsilapedi, lecturer at Rhodes University, will weigh in on this very shortly. Suspended public protector advocate Busisiwe Mqwebane is once again headed to the Western Cape High Court this week. We'll speak to legal expert Mpumelelo Zikalala on this. South Africa's energy crisis is expected to feature prominently at this year's Mining Indaba in Cape Town. We speak to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energies in Ntokozo Ncwabe. Well, hello and welcome live from our studios in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. You're watching The Week Ahead. Thank you for tuning in. Let's take a look at some of those stories we can expect for the week ahead. Of course, interact with us on our social media platforms at The Week Ahead or using the hashtag The Week Ahead. I'm your host, Liesl Wilson. All right, so first up, EFF leader Julius Malema says that the party will never be addressed by President Ramaphosa during the State of the Nation, or Sona, which is set to occur on the 9th of February 2023. Malema was addressing the first Gauteng provincial plenum of the 3rd Provincial People's Assembly at the Emperor's Palace on Saturday. SABC News reporter Kanima Panga filed this report.
President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address may not go ahead seamlessly, as the EFF charges that they are going to show the president, quote-unquote, what they are made of on that day.
At the 9th February, we are going to show him what we are made of there in Parliament. We will never be addressed by a constitutional delinquent.
The 2023 Sona comes at a time where the country is facing a number of socio-economic challenges. In addition, the country continues to endure rolling blackouts with no end in sight. The president also delivers a Sona while the Phala scandal hangs in the air amid ongoing investigations. He has launched an application at the Apex Court to review and set aside the Section 89 probe report into the matter, which found that he has a case to answer. The EFF, however, has taken the position that Ramaphosa should, quote-unquote, never find peace for having violated the Constitution.
The courts can protect him anyhow, but who will face him in Parliament? And there is no court that will protect him. We will be there and we are going to take him head on.
Amid urgent challenges in the country, President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to deliver his 7th State of the Nation address to a joint sitting of the National Assembly and National Council of Provinces on Thursday, 9 February 2023 at 7 p.m. at the Cape Town City Hall. Kani Mapanga, SABC News, Kempton Park.
Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to deliver the State of the Nation address this coming week. We're going to invite you to interact with us. Call us on 011-714-0677 or 0678. Share with us what pressing issues it is that you would think the president should be focusing in on his address. Again, that number is 011-714-0677 or 0678. You're welcome to interact with us throughout the show. As we take a look at other news now making headlines, communities in the Free State continue to battle to secure basic services. Many towns in the province are experiencing lack of water supply due to inadequate or aging infrastructure. All this comes as some municipalities are battling to service and maintain the infrastructure. The situation is also worsened by frequent power cuts.
Although it's still early in the year, residents in the Free State are already up in arms. Lack of basic services continue to be a thorny issue for them. The challenges range from shortages of water to poor infrastructure. Recently, Kroonstad and Ventersburg residents embarked on a violent protest over the shortage of water. They say the situation has been continuing for years.
We are disturbed by the smell of sewage and water going through our yards. I'm living with young children and I'm struggling with the sewage that runs in the streets. I have more than 21 years living here with the sewer spilling in front of my yard. The other thing is water, which is a great challenge here in Mamahabane in Ventersburg. We don't have water for a period of 3 to 4 weeks in our area.
3 weeks to 4 weeks.
Even at schools, children don't have water. Their education is affected because they have to leave school early because of lack of water, and we don't know what is the cause of the problem.
The Machabeng municipality, which includes towns such as Welkom, Virginia, Odendaalsrest, Hennenman and Ventersburg, has a challenge of water supply to its residents. The municipality says they have requested the Minister of Water and Sanitation as well as the provincial government to assist them.
We know that once we make that request to Minister Senzo, and he will then interact with Minister of Finance to intervene in our own municipality around issues of water, which is they remain a challenge because of aging infrastructure and all those challenges. And even ourselves as a municipality, we did not put a maintenance plan, which is now in the new budget, the budget that we are implementing.
Cooperative governance says plans are in place to assist the struggling municipalities.
Would like to state categorically that it does support municipalities with bulk infrastructure, and in instances where municipalities have to keep on supporting their network, their infrastructure, they are allowed 10% of their allocated funds to do so.
Other towns such as Zastron in Muhugara municipality continue to battle with water shortages despite efforts made by the department to improve their situation. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Meanwhile, David Mabuza has confirmed that he has resigned as Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa. Mabuza was speaking at his brother's funeral service in Mpumalanga and was nominated from the floor but declined at the ANC's national conference back in December. Mabuza was succeeded by Paul Mashatile as the party's deputy president. He was also not present at the ANC's NEC and Cabinet Dikgotla.
Njengoba nathi ukuthi bokune conference angisho athi angisavuma angithi bokune conference manje ke bengingu-deputy president we-ANC kodwa kuleya conference kukhethwe Paul Mashatile ukuthi abe ngu-deputy president.
Meanwhile, the presidency says President Cyril Ramaphosa has requested David Mabuza to remain in his position as deputy president until the modalities of his departure and transition have been finalized. The presidential spokesperson Vincent Mangwenya has confirmed that Mabuza wants to step down from his position following the outcome of the governing party's 55th National Conference in December of last year. Mabuza confirmed his resignation yesterday. The former ANC Treasurer General Paul Mashatile has succeeded Mabuza as the party's deputy president.
Deputy President Mabuza has expressed a desire to step down from his position following the outcome of the governing party's leadership election in December last year. However, President Ramaphosa has requested the Deputy President to remain in his role until such time the modalities of his departure as well as the transition have been finalized.
All right, so for more, we're going to be joined by Dr. Thapelo Tsilapedi, lecturer at Rhodes University, perhaps to unpack what we can expect on the politics front. A very good afternoon to you, Dr. Thapelo. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
No, thank you for the invite, and hi to your viewers.
So with Sona coming up on Thursday, it's obviously a chance for the president to directly speak to the citizens, perhaps outline, offer reassurance, and speak to some of the issues that are grappling the nation. In lieu of what is currently transpiring in the country, what are some of the things that we can expect the president to address from the Sona 2023, and is it going to be inspiring enough?
Well, the ANC just recently came back from the Cabinet Dikgotla, and it is from there largely really are going to speak about issues on the Sona, the president rather. But if you look at that meeting and the resolutions therefore, part of the main issues are, of course, the ESCOM issue and the matter just around the unbundling and the issues around security and the sort of resolution around by the end of the year, the ANC would like to see load shedding to have ended. So that's been interesting. In fact, they've tied the issue around electricity, also to the issue of BRICS. So they would like BRICS to also discuss that, seeing as this year ANC will be chairing BRICS, and they'll be hosting as well. The second thing I think the President will talk about looking at the cabinet of Africa is the issue around the local service delivery, particularly at the municipal level. They're looking at the district development model and what sort of interventions can be made in terms of monitoring and evaluating service delivery there. I've said before that part of the narrative around corruption, people think of it at the national level, but really at the provincial and specifically at the municipal level, there's a lot of programs there. And the Lokotla was able to also then talk about issues around political assassinations, and how do you then combat corruption at that level. I think the other final issue for me was issue around just safety and security of ordinary citizens. That there's been so many thousands of new entrants into the police service, and they've tied that to issues around GBV, and potentially for GBV cases to have its own independent unit within the service. So it's those things, man. I think there's quite a lot of things that if you look at the cabinet that we should be expecting, particularly also just around the escalating costs of goods and services in the country and how the ANC can mitigate against that. So whether that's pertaining to government revenue or the tax regime, we should be expecting some nice chocolates there in the ticket box of the ANC government.
Dr. Sapelo, on the back of that, during his first Sona address, we heard the president speak about ways in which he vows to set the economy on a new path regarding growth. And, we're looking at the state of the economy to date. We're also seeing sentiments that have been echoed where, they're speaking about government considering South Africa's rolling blackouts a national state of disaster. So the question is he likely to outline improved programs planned to deal with the rolling blackouts at this point? Also, what is your take on that proposition for it to be declared a national state of disaster? How will that also impact dynamics going forward from an investment point of view?
Look, I think, again, when you go back to the meetings or the outcomes of Cabinet Lokata, you get a sense that the ANC is also addressing some of the concerns of investors, particularly around energy. And I say this because they've begun to put timelines on where should South Africa be. Each year, at the end of the year, they want the issue of load shedding to end. So we can definitely expect that. I think the issue around the legality of the sort of emergency that the ANC is talking about with regards to resolving the energy crisis, I think we'll have to see how they're going to legally ensure that that is done. Because obviously I think a number of analysts have spoken about that the ANC is going to circumvent the law around perhaps environmental issues, particularly when you look at the Eastern Cape. And there's the car powership issue where they're thinking around having or generating power, off the coast of South Africa. So there are those engagements, I think, from analysts that they flagged that potentially one of the reasons why they want to get into a state of disaster or emergency situation around electricity is to be able to circumvent those issues around environmental laws. Now, we have yet to see that, but I think the ANC should be able to, or rather the president at the nation's address should be able to address some of the legal issues pertaining to that. We'll have to see whether he can take out South Africa from the problem that it is right now.
So speaking at the dynamics that are unfolding, we're obviously looking at reactions from political parties. We're also looking at public perception and whether there's trust in government to deliver on the promises that are set and put forth. So much so that we obviously heard that the EFF also coming out to say it will not allow President Cyril Ramaphosa to deliver his State of the Nation on Thursday until he comes clean on the Phala saga. And I just want to know, with political parties also coming out to say that there's nothing new that's going to be expressed, he's just going to rehash old unfulfilled promises. What's your take on how things could take a turn for the worst or best in that regard?
Look, I think the issue of sort of destabilizing Parliament or just hacking the president of Parliament, I think there's preparation for that on the part of Parliament, especially when people are announcing. I think, and this now pertains to the EFF and DA, part of the problem of opposition has been that, to me, they seem like they're politicking, positioning themselves for the next elections. But this is also not just to say that the ANC has painted itself in a positive light. I think there's been many promises that have been made for close to 10 years, if not just under that, around the issue of energy, particularly with the president having formed part of the war room under the president of former Zuma. So I think people are obviously quite tired around the world. I mean, if you look at it now, just a few weeks, the ANC has upped the ante in terms of the type of words they're using about resolving the crisis right now. Whereas in reality, they've had 5 years of failed. So, of course, people are disappointed. Am I expecting something different? No. I think President Ramaphosa is not particularly a person that gives that sort of, public speaking, the sense that he brings us into his confidence. So I do sort of expect the same sort of narrative, and I think a lot of people will be saying, let's see what they deliver, let's not believe the words. So I think that's why these timelines are so important.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And obviously the country investors, the world at large, in fact, going to be watching with bated breath. But we'll leave that conversation there. Thank you very much for your time here on the SABC. Dr. Thapelo Tsilapedi, lecturer at the University of Rhodes, just really unpacking what we can expect ahead of the Sona, some of the issues and concerns and challenges that I'd like to see be addressed during the State of the Nation that's set to go on the 9th of February, 2023. So as we take a look at other news now, one of the powers of Parliament, which exercises through the National Assemblies to decide whether or not a constitutional office bearer, such as the President, ahead of a Chapter 9 institution, as well as a judge should be removed from office. Mercedes Besant looks at how President Cyril Ramaphosa, Public Protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane, as well as Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe continue to fight to keep their jobs, thereby preventing the National Assembly from ultimately deciding on their fate.
The Constitution gives the National Assembly powers to elect and remove a president from office. It can do so by way of a vote of no confidence in terms of Section 102 or removal proceedings in terms of Section 89. A vote of no confidence requires a simple majority of 201 members of the National Assembly.
And a motion of no confidence does not require any finding of incapacity, misconduct, or a violation of the law, but is merely a reflection of the fact that the President is elected by the National Assembly and may therefore be removed by the National Assembly if it no longer has confidence in the ability of the incumbent to continue to carry out their constitutional responsibilities. In the case of a motion of no confidence, the National Assembly can do so through a simple majority of 50% plus one votes, whereas in the case of a removal or under impeachment proceedings, that requires a 2/3 majority.
However, a president can only be removed from office in terms of Section 89 of the Constitution on grounds of serious violation of the law or the Constitution, serious misconduct, or inability to perform functions of office. There must be prima facie evidence before a motion is approved in terms of Section 89. National Assembly Rule 129 was developed following a successful constitutional court challenge by the EFF over the Nkandla matter in December 2017. It outlined the procedure to be followed whenever Section 89 is invoked by a member of the National Assembly. The EFF said this when the rule was adopted in November 2018.
And it seems that the next person who must be taken through this process is Ramaphosa. We must investigate as Parliament. We must put this rule into a test.
4 years later, Ndlozi's prediction came to pass when the Speaker appointed a 3-member independent panel of experts headed by retired Chief Justice Sandile Ngcobo to assess whether there was sufficient evidence which would warrant the possible impeachment of the President by the National Assembly over the Phala debacle. The panel concluded its assessment and handed over the report to the National Assembly Speaker at the end of November last year.
It was a complex matter. Complex indeed because it's a parliamentary process which belongs to Parliament as the representative of the people. Dragging the President before an impeachment process is a huge decision. It cannot be done on flimsy grounds. There has to be something tangible that you can hold on to before you take that decision. That's why there was a panel to look at only what we have and thereafter make a decision.
The panel found that the President may have seriously violated the Constitution. However, President Ramaphosa decided to take the report on judicial review. It was also tabled before a special sitting of the Assembly on the 13th of December for debate and consideration.
Parliament's independence must be understood against its broad constitutional role, which requires it to maintain effective oversight over the executive.
MPs had to vote on whether to abstain, accept or reject the report, and whether an impeachment committee should be established for the President to face a Section 89 inquiry. 5 ANC MPs defied the party line by voting in favor of President Ramaphosa facing a Section 89 inquiry.
Dlamini Zuma, NC.
As a disciplined member of the ANC, I vote yes.
The report was, however, rejected by the majority of ANC MPs in the House.
Those who have voted yes, 148, and those who have voted no, 214. Abstained, hold on, honorable members. Abstention 2. And therefore, the Section 89(1) inquiry will therefore not be proceeded with. I thank you, honorable members.
The storm over the Section 89 panel report does not seem to be over. The EFF has approached the Constitutional Court to ask it to declare invalid the method that was used to vote on the report. The Speaker is opposing the EFF's application. Another constitutional office bearer facing a parliamentary inquiry is suspended public protector Busisiwe Mkhwebane. However, Mkhwebane can only be removed from office if the National Assembly adopts such a motion with the supporting vote of at least 2/3 majority. Western Cape's top judge, John Hlophe, who was found guilty of gross misconduct by the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, is the first judge who has been referred to the National Assembly by the JSE for a possible removal. He was suspended last month by the President. This despite the fact that Hlophe is challenging the JSE's decision in courts. While Hlophe is fighting through the courts to keep his job, the National Assembly is yet to process the JSE's recommendations for his possible impeachment.
We understand that due to a dispute over funding for his litigation, Judge Hlophe has failed to file the appeal record with the Supreme Court of Appeal on the due date of 21st January 2023. This means that in terms of Rule 8 of the Supreme Court of Appeal, his appeal has lapsed and he will have to file a court application in order to reinstate it. What this also means is that there is no longer any legal impediment stopping Parliament from proceeding with the impeachment process. Judges Matter urges Parliament to proceed with this work as soon as possible in order to bring to a conclusion a matter that has dragged on for 15 years.
Also, the Constitution requires the National Assembly to only remove a judge from office with a resolution supported by at least a two-thirds majority.
Although there are some similarities between the impeachment of the president, the public protector, and judges, there are also some important differences. The common feature amongst all three is that you need a two-thirds majority vote in the National Assembly. The main difference is in how you get there. For both the president and the public protector, Parliament has to set up a special committee that must run an inquiry to establish if there are grounds of removal from office of that office bearer. However, for judges, Parliament does not do any inquiry, as the inquiry is already done by the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, which establishes the grounds of impeachment of a judge, and the Judicial Service Commission, which recommends that a judge be removed from office. Ultimately, all that Parliament does is simply to vote on whether a judge should be removed from office, and that vote must be by two-thirds of the members of the National Assembly.
The National Assembly is yet to test its constitutional powers of removing from office either a sitting president, a head of a Chapter 9 institution, or even a sitting judge by using a two-thirds majority. Mercedes Besant, SABC News, Parliament.
All right, so welcome back. The week ahead with myself, Liesl Wilson, continues. Now, South Africa's energy crisis is expected to feature prominently at this year's Mining Indaba in Cape Town. The annual event is set down for the 6th to the 9th of February and will provide delegates with valuable insight into the continent's latest mining trends and investment opportunities.
The future of the mining industry globally will take center stage at the annual Mining Indaba. Everything from geopolitical uncertainty, costs, productivity, to the energy crisis. In South Africa, rail and port systems constraints and community relations continue to plague the industry. The Minerals Council of South Africa says the gathering should resolve to work together to address existing challenges.
There must be a complete commitment that we will work together to try and solve this. And it's not only us, it's not only mining that are in this boat. Agriculture, the chemical industry, the forestry industry, really important part of the South African economy that needs to have these constraints lifted.
The latest data from Stats SA shows that mining production contracted by 9% year-on-year in November, marking the 10th consecutive month of decline in mining production. Mineral sales also decreased by 15.2% during the same period. Erratic power supply, inflationary pressures, supply chain disruptions, and the challenges associated with illegal mining continued to restrict production. This year's meeting will serve as an opportunity to attract investment from international energy supply players.
As much as we see the current energy crisis in South Africa as a challenge, we shouldn't undermine or underestimate the challenge that it is and the impact that it has, particularly on those that are less fortunate and those that are, running small businesses. We cannot underestimate the impact, but with that, there's also an opportunity for international investment, specifically in light, if you consider just transition, because just transition are commitments that have made to improve the environment and reduce the impact of climate change on the environment. And this is an international commitment that countries are making. And within that, coming into Africa, and specifically the South African, the Africa Mining Indaba, but being hosted by South Africa, where there's an existing energy crisis, there is ample opportunity there, I think, to say, how do we support South Africa? We need to look at international players that supply electricity.
Something like making enough money available to Eskom to run the diesel turbines will have an impact. I mean, if they run full blast, they can shave 1 or 2 levels of load shedding off the off our problems.
The energy supply challenge has now forced some mining companies to decrease their reliance on power utility Eskom. Harmony is on its second phase of building its renewable plant, which will produce over 100 megawatts of electricity.
The run rate for Harmony since we started with the program a few years ago is about 1.6 billion rand of savings in electricity.
On Monday, the Minerals Council will launch the 2022 Facts and Figures at the opening of the Indaba. This annual publication will provide an in-depth data and insights into the status and performance of the mining industry, as well as its contribution to the economy. Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Right, so South Africa's energy crisis is expected to dominate discussions at this year's Mining Indaba, which kicks off in Cape Town on Monday. Experts say the mining sector will have to find alternative sources of energy to lessen its reliance on the national power utility. They say that this will assist Eskom to alleviate rolling blackouts. In 2021, the mining sector contributed 8.7% to South Africa's gross domestic product. Perhaps for this and more, let's bring in Togozo Ngwabe, Deputy Director General of Mineral and Energy Policy at the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. A very good afternoon to you, Togozo. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon to the listeners at home.
Perhaps let's look at some of the dynamics that have affected the mining industry to date, where according to the Minerals Council of South Africa, the mining industry uses about 30% of Eskom's annual power supply. And I wonder, how has the rolling blackouts really affected the sector in terms of production?
Well, it is true that the blackouts have certainly affected the entire economy negatively, and more so mining, as it is one of the biggest contributors to the GDP. And when we look at our production statistics, we know that in November, we declined by 9% year on year, and that it puts us at about the 10th month of continuous contraction, and that is a cause for concern for us, because when we look at sales as well, we've gone down by about 15.2%, and we really do see that it's having a huge negative impact on the functioning of the sector. I must though say that some of the interventions that we've come up with, like lifting the threshold completely on embedded generation, is beginning to yield results. Okay. For example, Goldfields has built a 50 megawatt solar power plant, which is fully operational at this stage, and they have a plan to upscale that plant with an additional 10,000 panels. And they have also installed a 140-meter tower to measure wind over time. And the readings that they are getting out of the tower are proving to be positive. So there are plans, to also set up a wind generator there to support that particular operation, as well as sell that to the grid. So the creation of that prosumer market is also going to assist a lot going forward.
Because I'm so glad you mentioned, given the country's energy crisis, the steps the department is doing to obviously help alleviate disinvestment, but also looking at alternatives to help alleviate the industry's reliance on the power grid. So my next question then looks at the mining charter, which, as we know, was adopted back in 2018. And really, as we look at the improvements, what sort of improvements has it brought to the sector to date?
If you look at the revised mining charter, one of the things that we engaged robustly on with the industry is transformation in terms of one ownership, but also transformation in terms of looking after the interests of communities and the interest of workers. And that charter specifically says there must be a 5%, for example, allocation or set aside for ownership for host communities, equally for the workers, because they are actually the people who turn investment into wealth for mining companies. And we are seeing quite good progress, I must say, across the sector in that regard.
So that obviously also speaks to, some of the ESG agendas that have been put forth and how the industry is also going to navigate that and really what the focus is going to be. Perhaps as we look further afield onto the continent, what are some of the challenges that African mining companies are facing in providing raw materials into the more rapidly growing market, still whilst ensuring that the continent can manage this energy transition that we hear being tossed around all the time?
The energy debate and just transition in the context of the African continent is quite an interesting one, because the African continent still has a big challenge when it comes to energy poverty. A very small percentage of the population on the continent still do not have access to energy. So whilst countries that are at a more advanced stage are talking about just transition, a lot of us on this continent are still struggling or grappling with ensuring access to electricity. So that on its own is the first hurdle that affects production and the ability to supply the market with the critical minerals. So hence we've always been consistent to say there is no doubt and there is no debate about our commitment to the just transition, but it has to be done at a pace and scale that countries can afford, because for us on this continent, it's more of a balancing act, that you look after the environment, ensure just transition, whilst driving robust programs to ensure access to electricity. Access to electricity that is also affordable to the people of the continent.
No, absolutely, Ntokozo. And I know these and more will be part of the discussions that are going to be happening at the Mining Indaba. I think just in conclusion, one issue that comes to mind is the issue of illegal mining and dealing with the issue of zama-zamas at launch. And I wonder if this is also going to top the agenda. How are we going to begin to deal with the devastating effects that it has brought about, perhaps also the violence associated with this organized criminal activity?
Illegal mining or illicit activities within the mining value chain is always on the agenda during Mining Indaba. However, I think we do need to continuously emphasize the fact that once you have the word illegal, it means it's something that goes against the law. And that's a matter for law enforcement agencies to deal with. However, having said that, we've done quite a bit of work as the department, for example, in this past year, collaborating with the SABC in investigating this crime. Additionally, we've also sent out a team of technocrats to a number of countries on the continent to learn how do they regularize some of the illegal activities, particularly those that are done by locals at a small scale, just as a means for survival. And there are very interesting lessons that we're learning in terms of regularizing them and licensing them. The big criminals are then dealt with accordingly by the law enforcement agencies.
All right, so let's see how that also yet again tops the agenda this time round. But we'll leave the conversation there. Thank you for your time here on the SABC. Ntokozo Ncwabe, Deputy Director General of Mineral and Energy Policy at the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, chatting ahead of the Mining Indaba that is set to take place between the 6th and the 9th of February in Cape Town. Again, delegates from around the world will converge in Cape Town to really discuss pertinent issues affecting the African mining sector at large. Again, thank you to Ntokozo for her time. In other news, South Africa will find out this month whether it will be grey-listed by international finance watchdog, the Financial Action Task Force. The body had previously found that South Africa scored poorly when it came to rigorous laws relating to anti-money laundering and the countering of financing terrorism. Our government has been trying to avert the possibility of grey-listing, and it has introduced the General Laws Amendment Bill late last year, which seeks to plug the gaps that had been identified.
Botswana was grey-listed in October 2018 as the Financial Action Task Force felt that it was poorly handling its anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing regimes. The head of the Botswana Chamber of Mines says this made executing financial transactions, whether at an individual or corporate level, uncomfortable, in some cases difficult.
From a corporate level, you are also going to see the same because you do transactions between businesses, you do transactions businesses locally and internationally. And when you carry out those transactions, you are bound by the same regulations to be able to specify to the last detail where the money is going from, where you got the money from, and what its intentions are meant for.
From a financial markets perspective, the grey listing created the problem of negative perception of the Botswana economy as a favourable place to invest. The Botswana Stock Exchange says it had to constantly reassure local and international investors that it was still worth investing on the exchange.
You know, it becomes very difficult for you to attract new investors into our market, both domestic and international investors. And also there is some level of investors pulling out of the market. You know, some just start selling off their shares and divesting from the market.
As South Africa awaits the Financial Action Task Force call later this month, there are worries that a negative move will see a decline in GDP, which the country can ill afford given its current challenges with load shedding.
The truth is that it will filter down to things like the debt to GDP ratio becoming more unstable and harder to bring down. You're likely to see increases in poverty, unemployment and inequality just due to the fact that South Africa's reputation becomes a little bit riskier, and it'll be more difficult for us to get financing internationally and deal with any international counterparties.
But even if grey listing is inevitable, it is possible to lose the label, although by the sounds of it, it's not easy. Botswana's negative status was lifted after 3 years in October 2021.
It takes a lot of time. It takes drafting of rules and regulations, consultation with the market, overhauling the old rules and laws that are there, and they need to get through stakeholders, they need to get through parliament, and then also ultimately developing rules and regulations among that. And generally also to get everybody to comply with a wide spectrum of the economy. So it's not a joke, it's a lot of work, and that takes a lot of time.
Given the significance of South Africa as the continent's financial capital, many will be holding thumbs for a positive outcome.
South Africa is a big financial powerhouse for SADC, and I think it would be in order firstly for you not to be grey listed. We hope that you don't get grey listed. And secondly, if it does happen, to just work quickly to reverse the situation, because that's the only way I think we're going to see it go through.
While South Africans would want to avoid the experiences shared by Botswana market players, the expectation is that grey listing is a done deal. The Financial Action Task Force is expected to announce its decision on South Africa around the time of the national budget later this month. Nompumelelo Siziba, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, so in other news now for the week ahead, suspended public protector advocate Busisiwe Mgwebane is once again headed to the Western Cape High Court this week. She's challenging the dismissal of her recusal application by the chairperson of the Parliamentary inquiry probing her fitness to hold office, Qubudile Diandi and DA-MP Kevin Millaham. Now, Mgwebane also wants President Cyril Ramaphosa to be summoned to appear before the committee. But perhaps for more on this, let's bring in legal expert Mpumelelo Zikalala. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you for your time here on the SABC.
Good afternoon to us and also good afternoon to your viewers.
So Mpumelelo, suspended public protector advocate Busisiwe Mgwebane is once again headed to the Western Cape High Court this week. And really, what is set to unfold?
It's basically going to be the arguments that say, from her side, I need these particular witnesses to come in. There's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't be part and parcel, and to provide this crucial evidence that I think they hold, so that the presiding officers at the end of the day are able to make that very important decision. Now, when it comes to the presiding office in its element of biasness, the test is that the reasonable test of bias must be something which is apprehendable from the side of the person who's making the application. Now, if there are going to be certain instances that can be highlighted of saying that this is what you allowed, this is what you did not allow, this is why you did not want to recuse yourself from this particular application. And I, as the applicant of the firm, believe that you are going to come to a fair conclusion at the end of the day due to external forces influencing your decision. On that basis, you shouldn't sit on that particular chair and decide this matter. So this is what is going to be crucial when this matter goes to court. And that's what the judges will have to assess, whether there's a reasonable apprehension of biasness. Does it really exist from the side of the applicant, in this case, Advocate Mkoba?
On the back of that, she also wants the president to be summoned to appear before the committee, and as well as the former public protector, Thuli Madonsela, who's come out to say that her testimony will not assist Section 194 committee. So she doesn't feel the need to come and appear before the parliamentary inquiry. But again, she may be subpoenaed. How are these dynamics also affecting proceedings then?
Unfortunately, it's not up to Advocate Madonsela to decide whether evidence is relevant or not, because she does not know the type of questions which are going to be asked. So for her, it's purely a sense of making herself available for that particular commission to sit, and for the presiding officer to then take a step and say, your name has appeared as one of the list of witnesses that ought to come and give evidence on this particular matter. We are of the firm belief, as advised by the applicants or the respondents, in this case, Advocate Mkoba, that you are going to bring crucial evidence. Certainly, because we are dealing with the fitness of the public protector, you are going to have more insight as to how a public protector is supposed to act. You've been in that position before. You hold very intimate knowledge even of the matters that maybe she has inherited, the way in which service providers are then extracted, because we've never been public protectors before as presiding officers. So if you have been in that position, you would have intimate knowledge as to how internal processes are then done, and you'll be able to shed light. So any evidence which is going to come to our aid and assist us in arriving to a just conclusion and just decision must be welcomed at all times. So if you feel, or if we feel even as presiding officer that we are going to need your input, then Advocate Madonsela, please come through, and you are going to be subjected to whatever testimony processes are there and available.
Mpumelelo, with her term also set to have ended this year, what legacy does this leave on the Chapter 9 institution at large? Given all these legal battles that are unfolding, is it even going to end come October?
I don't think so, because it's still quite a long road. Whoever's going to lose at the end of this particular battle can certainly go up to the High Court for a review application. You can already see there are two applications which have gone to court, one which is pending, another one which has been finalized. So by the end of the whole process, or the final decision has been made, whoever is a losing party can still go to the SCA, can still go to the court. But what it does, let's remember that South Africa is a sort of a young country when it comes to how these Chapter 9 institutions are supposed to work. So we are trying to find our way and our paths as to how these processes ought to be done. When you have instances where, especially the public protector and government are in conflict, especially when one feels that, or even parliamentarians feel that something the public protector is not doing, so they must be brought to book, and their level of fitness must then be decided. Secondly, it's going to assist in making sure, or crafting maybe a brief skeleton of saying, what is a fit and proper public protector? What sort of duty should be attached? In addition to what our constitution tells us and other relevant legislation, what else should we look at when you see assessing the conduct, or whether the public protector is doing good work or not? On the contrary, though, one would say we probably, Advocate Mkoba would have served in the very best period. If you look at the clean audits that have been achieved, the number of cases that have been finalized, there may be adverse cases here and there when it comes to court proceedings where judges have been scaling on an order and personal court orders. But another thing that you must look at is, aren't we then curtailing the work of the public protector? Because anyone who's going to come in after her is going to be afraid to pen down a judgment or to pen down any recommendations which are contrary to any politicians. We're out of the fear of being worked or being given personal court orders. So it's one of the things that must be looked at holistically. And let's maybe take a step back and look at the real intention of creating these Chapter 9 institutions. Are they really working in the manner in which they're supposed to work in? Are they serving the people that they're serving in? They shouldn't be stating or using their time to deal with those internal battles. They should be out there helping the community of South Africa to make sure that they're able to get the services that they deserve, as enriched and protected by the Constitution.
So, thank you very much for that context. And obviously, the country is watching with bated breath. Perhaps as we look at the legal fraternity or the legal sector at large, let's move our attention to the president having just announced the nomination of Justice Molimela for position of the president of the SCA, the Supreme Court of Appeal. Help us understand what this means, the significance of the development, perhaps the processes that are set to follow for that important position.
The processes are prescribed by Section 174 of the Constitution. So if the president has a certain name or individual in mind, he's then obliged, and it's compulsory that that particular recommendation must then go to the Judicial Services Commission, who's going to sit and call the particular candidate for an interview. And certain legal fraternity role players will have an opportunity to ask questions to her to provide certain information. Us as members of the public are also given a particular opportunity. I think it speaks to the transparency of the whole process, the rigorous process of saying that we must have an individual that we must be able to trust. On the qualifications side, I don't think we're going to have a problem with that with the nominated individuals. But what matters the most is, are you then able to understand the duty or the role that you need to do as the president of the SCA? There are issues with access to justice, issues with transformation of the judiciary, issues with transformation within the legal sector. When it comes to introduction of technology in other courts, what role are you going to play to make sure that things are done efficiently? We shouldn't have a situation where appeals are going to be submitted today and only be finalized in 3 or 4 months' time. Because the question then is, what about the litigants? They're paying exorbitant legal fees, and yet they're not getting the results and the real fruits of those results when they get them. By the time judgments are issued, sometimes the horse is bolted in terms of what you want to achieve by going to litigation in the first place. So those are the type of things in which the JSC would have to ask. And so sort of when they report back to the president, they will say, yes, Mr. President, this is the individual that you have chosen. We have taken her through the rigorous process of asking those important questions. And members of the public have done that. And we do see really that they are the proper candidate to be able to serve as president of the SCA.
Well, just very quickly, speaking of the transparency of the process that's set to be undergone, what do we know about Justice Molemela at this point? Beyond perhaps her being the first woman to establish a law firm in Bloemfontein? And do you think when you speak about the understanding the role and the duty that's required, perhaps also introducing technology and other mechanisms to improve the system at large, do you think she's up for the challenge?
I think she is, but it will matter the most as to what of innovative ideas is she going to come up or maybe present while those case interviews have been conducted. Now, for a track record, she's been a judge president before, she's been at the SCA before, so when we talk about how the bench actually works, we're dealing with someone who's well vested as to how judgments are supposed to be issued, the importance of writing them quickly, the importance of being able to choose acting judges so that you're able to grow the pool of judges that you can be able to pull from at a later stage. So I think when it comes to that particular aspect, we're more or less covered. What matters the most is what innovative ways are we going to come up with to make sure that we're able to deal with this particular industry, especially if you're looking at the involvement of young legal practitioners and the involvement of women practitioners. It's also something that we can't ignore, so that at the end of the day, we're able to bring a proper, well-vested and well-trained pool of judges that you can be able to pull from if we need to fill in those presiding officers' posts.
Well, Malelo, just very quickly, another legal matter that has come to the fore, is the legal debate around the cadre deployment policy. We heard that the ANC is now set to appeal the ruling in which the DA has so far won, where it has to give its records. This is all based on the Zondo Commission and those findings. How would you weigh in on what's set to unfold in that regard, blurring the lines between what is political appointments, what is cadre deployment, etc.?
I think with all due respect on that one, the courts in this case are trying to govern something or to preside on something which is unpresidable, because it has been the practice all around the world that political parties will have certain influences. It's like having opinions. But what matters the most is that how do you hold the individuals that press the green button, that sign those appointment letters, are accountable? Now, in South Africa, there are laws which allow you to do that. So if a minister makes a certain decision, who is empowered by law to do that, you can go to the minister and say, I'm submitting a PI application. I want to see what rationale did you come up to at the end of the day. Section 33 of the Constitution is very clear. It says whatever decision which is taken, whether it's administrative in nature, must be lawful, procedurally fair, and also it must be reasonable. That's where the point of rationality will then to come in. Now, to attack the political party which simply says, I'm simply submitting my opinion, it seems to be a bit absurd to me, with all due respect, because at the end of the day, there's nothing that you are going to gain from that particular prospect. And when it comes to the practicality of all this process, how can you ask another political party to say, show us your know-how and the way in which you do things as another political party? They're contesting the same space. At the end of the day, there are going to be those trade secrets that can't be shared with anyone. So it's not going to achieve anything, because that's not the person that should be held accountable. Hold the proper individuals that must be held accountable as empowered by the legislation. Now, legislation is there to make sure that you're able to cover that. The Constitution and also PIA will be able to deal with all those instances. I think this ruling was a bit overreaching in terms of the protection of that particular right. The current processes that we have now are more than adequate to deal with that. And you can even test it with Section 36 of the Constitution. Those limitations and what we have as alternative remedies are quite enough and adequate to be able to deal and to be able to hold any government official or any entity for that case accountable when it comes to the decisions in which they take.
Mpumelelo, thank you once again for your time here on the SABC. Mpumelelo Zikalala is a legal expert weighing in on some of the legal matters that are set to make headlines this week. On the back of that, suspended Public Protector Advocate Busisiwe Mkhwebane once again heading to the Western Cape High Court this week. He really unpacking these and some of the other stories as well. But unfortunately, we run out of time. We have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much for tuning in. We are back next weekend for a look at the week in review. Until then, take care. For myself, Liesl Wilson, and the rest of the team, it is goodbye for now.